The chilling silence of a Roman crowd is more dangerous than their roar. We begin not in battle, but in the aftermath, as the noise of clashing steel has faded, replaced by the ominous quiet awaiting spectacle. This, then, is the fate of Queen Zenobia of Palmyra, captured by the legions of Emperor Aurelian in 272 CE, after years where she dared to defy the might of Rome, forging an empire that stretched across the wealthy East. That defiance earned her not a quick end, but an elevated, calculated humiliation, setting the stage for one of the most famous examples of how Rome perfected the art of breaking queens. The Roman triumph, the ultimate display of conquest, was being prepared for her because Aurelian knew that to merely kill her was to make her a martyr. To display her was to make her a perpetual lesson, making her capture the final chapter of a war, but the beginning of a profound psychological ordeal. You believe royalty protects you, but Rome will teach you that status is just a target. You are marched forward through the streets of Rome, your pace dictated entirely by the guards who flank you, as you realize that the chain locked around your wrists is not iron, but intricately worked gold, heavy, cold, and conspicuously bright. This is why gold chains were more terrifying than iron, as the chains catch the unfiltered Roman sunlight, ensuring that every citizen watching must look at you, and the weight is purposeful, designed not simply to restrain, but to pull at your shoulders, forcing a visible strain. You are not being moved, you are being presented, and the crowd's anticipation is audible, a low, rolling sound of thousands of voices layered together, ready for the performance. Gold chains are not restraint, they are theater, and you are the star of the tragedy. Zenobia understood this theater perfectly, knowing that Rome executes its forgotten enemies quickly. But when the empire chose to keep a high-value captive alive, it meant their body still had political utility. She had challenged Roman supremacy, minted her own coins, and forced the emperor to march east to erase her. But now, reduced from the warrior queen to a captured prize, her survival depended solely on maintaining a fragile composure, knowing she absolutely must not provide the Romans with the satisfaction of a total emotional collapse, as what came next changed everything. She thought she knew about survival. The empire didn't just defeat its enemies, it perfected the art of breaking queens by leveraging the rule of law. Rome did not rely on chaos, it relied on law, structured to protect its citizens and ruthlessly abandon everyone else. So Zenobia's defeat instantly stripped her of legal personhood. She was no longer queen, ally, or citizen, but was deemed hostis gentium, property, seized in war. And this distinction mattered profoundly for the legal loophole Rome used to destroy their enemies. Roman citizens could not be publicly flogged or executed without appeal, but Zenobia's body was now outside the jurisdiction of these protections, giving the Roman officials full license to decide how she would be transformed into a lasting lesson for the empire. Imagine your own wealth being woven into the instrument of your public downfall. During the weeks of your captivity, isolation becomes the primary weapon. As you are moved constantly between holding spaces, sleep is disrupted and food is rationed. Never severely enough to cause visible harm, but just enough to drain your certainty. No charge is announced, and no sentence is read. The guards watch, silent, giving nothing away, because the psychological terror lies entirely in the limbo, the endless possibility of execution, sudden removal, or a terrible, prolonged public spectacle, as Rome denied her the dignity of knowing her own end. The city prepared its stage for the grandest psychological weapon of the Roman Empire, raising banners along the Triumph route, which stretched nearly 4 kilometers from the Field of Mars to the Capitoline Hill. 4 kilometers of faces, 4 kilometers of exposure, establishing a goal of immersive domination. Before the prisoners appeared, the procession featured musicians, painted scenes of destroyed cities, and exotic animals, all proof that distant worlds had been reduced, proving that Zenobia was not merely a prisoner, she was the climax of this visual argument for Roman supremacy. The day arrives, and the gold chains commissioned for you are not subtle. They are massive, decorative links meant to display the sheer volume of wealth you once commanded, now converted into your personal, heavy burden, in a strategy to turn her own wealth against her. You are dressed in silks and jewels, forced to carry the very symbols of the power that was taken, and guards walk closely beside you, assisting only because the weight of the chains would otherwise cause you to collapse prematurely. As you step into the light, and the roar of the crowd is overwhelming, a physical wave of human curiosity and amusement. Zenobia walks slowly, deliberately, as she refused to give the crowd the breakdown they craved, refusing to rush and provide the Romans with the frenzied submission they anticipated, choosing instead to hold her head level without screaming or begging. This composure unsettles the Roman onlookers, who expected the definitive breakdown of a powerful woman, and this refusal to break is dangerous. Humiliation is designed to neutralize, and if a captive refuses to acknowledge the psychological defeat, their usefulness as a living symbol diminishes, meaning her life now hangs not on mercy, but on strategy. The procession moves at a glacial pace, stopping repeatedly so the crowd can absorb the spectacle of the fallen queen, as children are lifted onto shoulders to witness the silent danger of the Roman triumph route. Everyone notices every stumble and every labored breath. But as the route nears the final ascent to the Capitoline, Zenobia faces the most terrifying possibility of all, the diversion. Because not every high-value captive completed the triumph, and many were diverted quietly beneath the hill, toward the prison carved into the rock, meaning what came next could be her last step. While celebrations echoed above, below the Capitoline hill waited the Mamertine prison, the Tullianum, a silent structure cut deep into the rock, which was the final destination for Rome's most celebrated enemies, a place not for confinement, but for cessation, which is why Rome executed its enemies in silence. Prisoners were often lowered through a small hole into a dank, lightless lower chamber, a place of guaranteed demise. And this execution, hidden from the joyful procession, ensured that the triumph remained a celebration of victory, undisturbed by visible bloodshed. The Gaulish chieftain Vercingetorix learned this terrifying lesson slowly. Imprisoned for 6 years after his defeat by Caesar, he was paraded through Rome, only to be led away after the procession concluded, meaning the crowd never saw the secret fate of Rome's greatest foes. King Jugurtha of Numidia, too, was lowered into the Tullianum after his triumph, and starved for 6 days in darkness, his descent unheard by the celebrating city above, forcing Zenobia to walk, knowing that this silent end was only a side street away. Zenobia survived the day, and this survival, often labeled an act of Roman mercy, was pure strategy, because killing her would have been simple, but letting her live as a neutralized reminder was a longer-term investment. She was granted a villa near Rome and absorbed into Roman society, and every subsequent sighting of the former queen, dependent on Roman tolerance, reinforced the empire's dominion, making her a walking warning, a living monument to the fact that resistance, no matter how grand, ended in submission, proving how Rome turned a queen into a lesson. But not every queen could be neutralized by spectacle and political absorption, because far from the polished streets of Rome, in the rough, cold province of Britannia, another woman was about to challenge the empire with a fury that burned cities. She was not Rome's enemy. She was an ally who trusted Roman promises, and Rome taught her the cost of that trust in the most devastating way imaginable. In the story of the queen who trusted Rome's promises, this was Boudica, wife of Prasutagus, king of the Iceni, who was a client ruler permitted to govern so long as he obeyed, and upon his death around 60 CE, he sought to protect his family by making Emperor Nero co-heir with his 2 daughters. He believed this compromise, sanctioned by Roman law, would guarantee their security, but it was a fatal miscalculation, as Roman officials immediately ignored the will, seizing the lands and dispossessing the noble families, proving the fatal mistake of trusting the Roman Empire.
when Boudica protested, appealing publicly to the very agreements Rome had approved. The empire delivered its brutal clarification. Roman law did not protect non-citizens, especially not defiant women. Boudica was seized, not privately, but in full public view, and she was flogged, a severe punishment typically spared for even allied elites, which was not simple enforcement. It was instruction delivered through deliberate violation of dignity, as the Roman way to silence a woman. Rome was not finished. Her young, unmarried, and completely unprotected daughters were taken by Roman soldiers, and the ancient historian Tacitus records the event with chilling brevity. But the meaning is clear. They were subjected to forbidden indulgence. This was calculated humiliation designed to destroy lineage and send an unmistakable message to the Iceni people. Nothing you value is safe when Rome is involved. Imagine standing in front of your people, your body already severely suffering from the beating,
forced to witness the violation of your children. This is the moment Rome expected you to break, to submit, to dissolve into helpless grief. But in that catastrophic violation, something in Boudica fractured and hardened into pure, directed rage, and the empire had sought to silence her through degradation, but instead they forged a weapon, making this the moment Rome accidentally created a weapon. When Boudica spoke again, it was not to Roman officials or diplomats. It was a primal demand for vengeance delivered to her own people as she spoke of her body, of her daughters, and of the destruction of their sovereignty. She raised an army, untrained and undisciplined, but unified by fury and a shared trauma, and Rome, complacent in its distant power, was caught completely off guard, beginning the fury that burned Roman Britain. The fire spread with terrifying speed, as Camulodunum, the first Roman colony, burned, followed by Londinium, modern London, and Verulamium, and tens of thousands of Romans and Roman sympathizers met a tragic end. The rebellion was less a calculated military campaign and more a cathartic purge, driven by the memory of the systemic humiliation delivered to their queen and her family, causing Roman authority to collapse entirely across the province in the purge that shocked the empire. For a moment, the future of Roman Britain hung in the balance, but Rome always responds the same way, with steel, formation, and overwhelming discipline, demonstrating why Rome never lost in the end. The legions led by Governor Suetonius Paulinus eventually cornered Boudica's forces in a battle whose exact location is now lost to history. But the outcome was never in doubt, as the disciplined Roman lines annihilated the furious, disorganized Iceni warriors. Boudica disappears from the narrative. Some accounts suggest she administered poison to herself rather than face capture and a triumph in Rome, creating the mystery of Boudica's vanishing act. Her daughters vanish completely. Their names are not recorded. Their fate after Rome used them to deliver its cruel message is not preserved, and silence closes over their story. As Rome restored order, and the rebellion became a stark, bloody lesson, not about cruelty, but about control and the cost of defiance. Zenobia and Boudica represent two facets of Roman conquest. Zenobia survived because her quiet humiliation was politically useful, while Boudica died, or vanished, because her rage failed to be contained and nearly ejected the empire from Britain, showing the two paths of defiance against Rome. When humiliation works, Rome preserves the captive as a living exhibit. When it fails, Rome destroys everything they touch, ensuring the memory of the resistance is poisoned by total defeat. Roman conquest did not rely only on legions. It relied profoundly on memory, on the psychological impact of images carried forward long after the battles ended. A queen in gilded chains, or daughters violated in public view. These were not random acts of brutality. They were deliberate, strategic acts of terror that traveled faster and farther than any standard military force, proving the psychological warfare that built the empire. The empire secured its vast holdings by demonstrating that dignity was conditional and humanity was negotiable. You look at the silent walls of the Tullianum beneath the hill, and you understand that the protections Rome celebrated, due process, appeal, citizenship, applied only within its sacred borders. revealing the true boundary of Roman law. For everyone else, defeat erased identity. Your status, your power, your loyalty, all evaporated the moment your army fell, and you realized that trusting Roman law to protect your person or your family was the most profound mistake of all. Simon Bar Kokhba, the leader of the Jewish revolt, was paraded through Titus's triumph in 71 CE, and the procession did not resume until word arrived that Simon had been executed beneath the hill, proving that death was a checkpoint, a necessary seal on the narrative of victory, as the execution that sealed the Roman triumph. Even in death, their bodies served a purpose, confirming the end of resistance and the absolute finality of Roman power. Zenobia lived in a gilded cage near Rome, a silent daily monument to Aurelian's victory, while Boudica became a ghost swallowed by the vast, cold forests of Britannia, her only lasting monument the leveled ruins of the Roman cities she burned. One was absorbed, the other erased, but both fates served the same function, reminding the world that the only acceptable status for a rival queen was submission, revealing the final choice Rome gave its enemies. What remains today are fragments of Tacitus's restrained horror, Josephus's careful records, and the still-standing stones of the Mamertine, and tourists walk past them now, few lingering long enough to feel the weight of what happened there. The stones do not speak, but they do not need to. They have already done their work, defining the true, silent boundary between Roman civilization and the relentless, calculated violence of its power, in the silent witnesses to Roman cruelty. This video is created for educational and historical purposes, examining themes of power, corruption, and human conflict without depicting explicit or graphic events. Rome called this order, and Rome called this civilization, but the queens who survived called it something else entirely. If they spoke at all, most did not, and that silence, the erasure of their perspective, may be the empire's most enduring and strategic success. If this story made you reflect on fragility of power, stay with us for the next chapter as we walk further into history's shadows.